The sound of a flat line is distinct. It is a monotonal scream that announces God has left the room. But in the sterile VIP suite of Chicago's St. Jude's Hospital, that terrifying sound was drowned out by something louder, the metallic clack-clack of a Glock 19 chambering a round. 15 of the world's best specialists stood frozen in terror, their Harvard degrees useless against the barrel of a gun. They had failed. The Mafia prince's nephew was dead. But in the back of the room, a nurse nobody noticed, a girl drowning in student debt and wearing scuffed sneakers, stepped forward to do the one thing the experts said was impossible. She was about to commit a crime to save a life. The air in the private wing of St. Jude's Hospital didn't smell like antiseptic. It smelled of expensive leather fear and the distinct coppery scent of impending violence. This wasn't a hospital room, it was a fortress. The entire 4th floor had been cleared out. Security guards with earpieces and bulging suit jackets lined the corridors, their eyes darting at every nurse who walked by with a tray of medication. Inside Suite 404, the atmosphere was suffocating. Dominic Moretti stood by the window staring out at the Chicago skyline, which was currently being battered by a relentless October rain. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than most people's cars, tailored to hide the shoulder holster beneath his left arm. He was 32, with the kind of face that stopped traffic. Sharp jawline, heavy brows, and eyes the color of burnt espresso. But right now, he looked like a man watching his world crumble. Behind him, the room was a chaotic symphony of medical alarms. Pressure is dropping 60/40. We're losing perfusion. Push another milligram of epinephrine now. The heart rate is erratic. He's going into VFib. 15 doctors. That was the count. Dominic had flown them in from Zurich, Tokyo, and Johns Hopkins. He had paid their exorbitant fees, chartered their private jets, and promised them bonuses that could retire them to the Amalfi Coast. They were the kings of pediatric cardiology, neonatology, and rare genetic disorders. And they were all failing. In the center of the room, inside a high-tech incubator that looked more like a spaceship than a crib, lay Leonardo. He was 3 hours old. He was tiny, his skin a terrifying shade of pale gray, his small chest heaving in jagged, unnatural rhythms. Sophia, Dominic's younger sister, lay on the hospital bed nearby, sedated but weeping in her sleep. She had nearly died giving birth to him, and if Leo didn't make it, Dominic knew Sophia wouldn't survive the grief. "Dr. Sterling," Dominic said. His voice was quiet, a low rumble that cut through the panic in the room instantly. "Why is my nephew turning blue?" Dr. Alistair Sterling, the chief of pediatrics at St. Jude's and the man ostensibly in charge of this circus, wiped a bead of sweat from his balding forehead. His hands, usually steady as a rock, were trembling inside his latex gloves. "Mr. Moretti," Sterling stammered, looking at the monitors that were flashing angry red numbers. "It's a resistant case of persistent pulmonary hypertension, complicated by what looks like severe sepsis. We are throwing everything we have at him. The ECMO machine is preparing to bypass his heart and lungs, but his veins are collapsing. We can't get the lines in." "You have 15 degrees on that wall, Sterling," Dominic said, turning around. His movement was slow, predatory. "You told me you were the best. You told me this facility was the best." It is biology, Mr. Moretti. Sometimes the anatomy just isn't compatible with life." Dominic walked over to the incubator. He looked down at the tiny infant, his sister's son. The baby looked so fragile, a little warrior fighting a war he couldn't win. Dominic reached out a finger, touching the glass. "Fix him," Dominic whispered. "We are trying." "I don't pay you to try." Dominic snapped, his voice rising to a roar that made 3 nurses flinch. "I pay you to be gods. If that boy dies, none of you are walking out of this room. Do you understand me?" The threat hung heavy in the air. The terrifying thing was, everyone knew it wasn't a figure of speech. Dominic Moretti was the capo of the Chicago outfit. He didn't make idle threats. The doctors redoubled their efforts, shouting orders, panic setting in. Syringes were uncapped. Monitors were adjusted. They were throwing science at the wall, hoping something would stick. In the corner of the room, unseen and unheard, stood Sarah Jenkins. She wasn't a specialist. She wasn't a doctor. She was a 24-year-old nurse on the night shift, currently assigned to empty the biohazard bins and restock the saline bags. She had messy brown hair, tied up in a utilitarian bun, and shadows under her eyes from working double shifts to pay off her father's gambling debts. Sarah held a bag of sterile gauze against her chest, her knuckles white. She was watching the monitors. She was watching the baby. And she was watching the doctors. "They're wrong." She thought, her heart hammering against her ribs. "They're all looking at the heart, but they're wrong." She had seen something. A twitch in the baby's left eyelid. The specific way the skin was mottling not just blue, but a lacy purple pattern spreading from the torso. And the smell. Amidst the rubbing alcohol and the sweat, she smelled something faint, sweet, and sickly, like burnt almonds. She took a step forward. "Get back," a security guard grunted, putting a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Docs only." "I need to check the IV fluids," Sarah lied, her voice trembling, but her eyes fixed on the incubator. "Not now." "He's crashing," Dr. Sterling screamed. "Flatline, we have a flatline start compressions." The room exploded into chaos. The monotone wail of the heart monitor filled the space. Beep. Dominic Moretti pulled his gun. Sarah felt the temperature in the room drop to absolute 0. Dominic Moretti didn't point the gun at the baby. He pointed it at Dr. Sterling's temple. "Bring him back." Dominic snarled, the safety clicking off. "You have 10 seconds." "I can't," Sterling cried, compressing the tiny chest with 2 thumbs. "He's gone into a systole. There's no electrical activity." 10, Dominic counted. "Mr. Moretti, please. This is madness," another doctor shouted from the back. 9. Sarah's mind was racing. She knew what was happening. She had seen it once before, not in a hospital, but in a dusty medical textbook from the 1970s she'd bought at a thrift store because she couldn't afford the new ones. It was a reaction so rare, so archaic, that modern doctors didn't even test for it anymore, because the precipitating drugs had been phased out. Except apparently, they hadn't. She looked at the IV bag hanging above the incubator. It was labeled Oxypent, a new ultra-expensive synthetic sedative that the VIP doctors loved because it cleared the system fast. But the baby wasn't reacting to the sedative. He was reacting to the preservative in the plastic tubing interacting with the drug. It was creating a chemical lock in the baby's nervous system. It wasn't heart failure. It was neuroparalytic shock. The doctors were treating a heart attack. They were pushing epinephrine. Epinephrine would accelerate the paralysis and kill him instantly. 8, Dominic said. His finger tightened on the trigger. Sarah looked at the guard. He was distracted by the gun. She looked at the crash cart. If she spoke up, they would throw her out or shoot her. She was a nobody. A nurse with a nursing degree from a community college and a bank account in the negative. These were Ivy League men. They wouldn't listen. But if I don't do anything, the baby dies. And then the doctor dies. And then Dominic Moretti goes to prison, and Sophia loses everything. She didn't make a conscious decision. Her body just moved. 7. Sarah dropped the gauze. She lunged past the security guard, ducking under his arm as he reached for her. "Hey!" the guard shouted. She sprinted toward the incubator. 6! "Get her out of here!" Dr. Sterling screamed, not stopping his compressions. Sarah didn't aim for the baby. She aimed for the wall, specifically the power strip that powered the ventilator and the infusion pumps. 5. She grabbed the thick black cord of the life support machine. "Don't touch that!" a nurse shrieked. Sarah yanked the cord with all her strength. The machines died. The ventilator stopped hissing. The infusion pump went dark. The room plunged into a sudden, shocking silence, save for the ambient rain against the window. 4. Dominic stopped counting. He swung the gun toward Sarah. "What did you do?" he roared. "You just killed him." Sarah didn't look at the gun. She scrambled to the incubator, shoved Dr. Sterling aside with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "Move!" and reached into the plastic box. "Shoot her!" Sterling yelled, stumbling back. She unplugged the life support. Dominic took 2 strides, the gun leveled at Sarah's head. "Get away from him! He's not dead!" Sarah screamed back, her voice cracking. She didn't look at Dominic. She looked at the baby. She grabbed the baby by his ankles, a shocking, rough movement, and flipped him upside down. "I said get away." Dominic cocked the hammer. "Shut up!" Sarah snapped. The room froze. Nobody told Dominic Moretti to shut up, not even the mayor. Sarah ignored the gun barrel that was now inches from her ear. She placed her fingers not on the baby's chest, but on the base of his spine right above the diaper line, and pressed hard, digging her thumb into a pressure point while simultaneously smacking the baby's back. "It's the tubing," Sarah yelled, breathless. "It's the preservative in the line. It's locking his diaphragm. The epinephrine is killing him. We have to flush it manually." She struck the baby's back again. Hard. "She's crazy," Sterling shouted. "Security, shoot her!" Dominic hesitated. He looked at the girl. She was shaking, sweat matting her hair to her forehead, but her hands were steady on the child. And in her eyes, he didn't see madness. He saw desperation. "Wait," Dominic said. Sarah ignored them all. She needed to shock the baby's system into rebooting. She needed to break the chemical lock. She did the unthinkable. She pinched the baby's skin hard enough to leave a bruise and blew a sharp puff of air directly into the baby's face, triggering the mammalian dive reflex. Then she squeezed the tiny chest not rhythmically, but in one violent, sustained compression. "Breathe, you little fighter," she whispered. "Come on, breathe." Nothing happened. The baby hung limp in her hands. "That's it," the guard said, stepping forward, reaching for his weapon. "Step away, miss." Dominic's face hardened. The hope vanished. He raised his gun again, his eyes cold and dead. "You wasted my time," he whispered. Then a sound, a wet, ragged gasp. It was quiet at first, like a kitten sneezing. Then a cough. Then a low, thin wail that grew louder and louder until it filled the silent room. "Well..." The baby's skin, previously grey, flushed a violent, angry pink. Sarah collapsed against the incubator, clutching the crying infant to her chest. She fell to her knees, sobbing, the baby wailing in her arms. The machines were still off. The doctors were frozen. Dominic lowered the gun. He looked at the crying baby. Then he looked at the nurse huddled on the floor, surrounded by million-dollar equipment she had just destroyed. "He's breathing," Dominic whispered, as if he couldn't believe the words. Sarah looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He was allergic to the plastic," she choked out. "The doctors, they were poisoning him." The silence that followed the baby's cry was heavier than the panic that had preceded it. For 10 seconds, the only sound was Leonardo's healthy, furious screaming. It was the most beautiful sound Dominic Moretti had ever heard. Dr. Sterling was the first to recover. His face, previously pale with fear, now flushed with indignation and embarrassment. He adjusted his glasses, stepping forward to regain control of his domain. "Give me the patient," Sterling demanded, reaching for the baby. "You have compromised the sterile field. You have likely introduced bacteria into a critically ill neonate. Security arrest this woman for assault and endangerment." Sarah shrank back, holding Leo tighter. She was trembling violently now that the adrenaline was fading. The reality of what she had done, assaulting a chief of medicine, destroying equipment, yelling at a mafia boss, was crashing down on her. "No," Sarah whispered. "Don't put him back on the machine. The tubing... It's the tubing." "Nonsense," Sterling barked. "That is medical-grade PVC. It is the standard for billionaires and kings. You are a delusional nurse who got lucky with a manual stimulation. Hand him over." 2 security guards stepped forward, their hands reaching for Sarah's arms to haul her up. "Don't touch her!" The voice came from the window. Low, lethal. Dominic Moretti walked toward the center of the room. He didn't look at the doctors. He didn't look at the guards. His eyes were locked on Sarah. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. He towered over her kneeling form. The smell of his cologne, sandalwood, and gunpowder filled Sarah's nose. He reached down. Sarah flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, Dominic gently placed his hand under the baby's head, supporting it. He looked at the color returning to Leo's cheeks. He looked at the rise and fall of the tiny chest, unassisted by machines. "You said they were poisoning him," Dominic said. "It wasn't a question." "I think so," Sarah stammered. "It's a rare reaction. Diethylhexyl phthalate leaching. It mimics sepsis, but causes paralysis. I saw the rash, the purple lace pattern." Dominic looked up at Sterling. "Did you see a rash, doctor?" Sterling swallowed hard. "The patient had mottling, which is consistent with sepsis. Did you see it? I was focused on the heart rhythm," Sterling defended. "Mr. Moretti, you cannot listen to a janitorial nurse over a board-certified specialist." "She nearly killed your nephew." Dominic stared at Sterling for a long moment. Then he looked back down at Sarah. "What is your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Jenkins." "Sarah Jenkins," Dominic repeated, testing the weight of the name on his tongue. "Stand up." Sarah struggled to her feet, her legs wobbling. She offered the baby to Dominic. "No," Dominic said. "You hold him. You're the only one who seems to know how to keep him alive." He turned to the head of his security detail, a scarred giant named Matteo. "Matteo." "Boss, clear the room." "Which one's boss?" "All of them," Dominic said, sweeping his hand toward the 15 specialists. "Get them out of my sight. If they are still in this hospital in 10 minutes, throw them off the roof." "Mr. Moretti," Sterling gasped. "You can't be serious. The baby needs monitoring. He needed a doctor." Dominic cut him off, his voice ice cold. He got 15, and they watched him die. This girl. He gestured to Sarah. She brought him back from the dead with her bare hands. Dominic stepped closer to Sterling, invading his personal space until their noses almost touched. Send your bill to my office, Sterling. If it's more than $1, I'll burn your practice to the ground. Now get out. The doctors fled. It was a stampede of white coats and expensive shoes. Within 60 seconds, the room was empty, except for Dominic Matteo, the sleeping Sophia, the baby, and Sarah. Sarah felt dizzy. She was holding the heir to the Moretti crime family, and the most dangerous man in Chicago was looking at her like she was a riddle he intended to solve. I should put him in a bassinet, Sarah said, her voice shaking. He needs warmth. Do what you need to do, Dominic said. He sat down in the leather chair next to his sister's bed, finally holstering his gun. He looked exhausted. Sarah found a standard hospital bassinet in the corner one, without the fancy tubing. She swaddled Leo tightly in warm blankets. She checked his pulse manually. It was strong. He's okay, she said softly. He's really okay. She turned to leave. I have to go. My shift supervisor is going to kill me for leaving my station, and I broke the ventilator. You're not going anywhere, Dominic said. Sarah froze. Sir. Dominic looked at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable. You think you're going back to mopping floors after this? He shook his head. You saved a Moretti. That makes you family, or... His eyes narrowed slightly. It makes you a liability. I won't tell anyone, Sarah said quickly, holding up her hands. I swear. I just want to keep my job. Dominic stood up and walked over to her. He reached into his jacket pocket. Sarah braced herself. He pulled out a checkbook. He wrote something quickly, tore off the slip, and held it out. Sarah looked at it. It was a check for $50,000. This is for tonight, Dominic said. Consider it a down payment. I can't take this, Sarah said. Take it, Dominic commanded. Because you're fired. What? Sarah's heart dropped. Please, no. I need this job. My dad, You're fired from St. Jude's, Dominic corrected. Because as of this moment, you work for me. Sarah stared at him. I don't understand. My nephew is leaving this hospital tonight. It's not safe here. Those machines. Dominic glanced at the sabotaged equipment. You said the tubing was the problem, but we use that equipment all over the world. It's never happened before. Dominic's expression darkened. Someone wanted Leo dead. Someone tampered with that machine, and those 15 idiots were too arrogant to see it. He looked Sarah dead in the eye. You saw it. You have eyes that work. So you're coming with us. Coming with you where? Sarah asked, panic rising. To the estate, Dominic said. You are going to be Leo's private nurse, 24 hours a day. You live with us. You eat with us. You breathe when we breathe. And if I refuse? Sarah asked, showing a spark of defiance that surprised even her. Dominic smirked. It was the first time he had smiled all night. It made him look devastatingly handsome. You just walked past a gun to save a baby. You don't know Sarah Jenkins. You're not the kind of person who walks away. He turned to Matteo. Pack Sophia's things. We leave in 5 minutes. Dominic turned back to Sarah. Welcome to the family, Sarah. Try to survive the night. The armored convoy moved like a funeral procession down Lakeshore Drive, cutting through the heavy Chicago rain. Sarah sat in the back of the lead SUV, a massive Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows thick enough to stop a sniper round. She held Leo in her arms. The baby was sleeping peacefully now, the color of his skin a healthy, soft pink, a stark contrast to the grey pallor that had haunted him an hour ago. Beside her sat Sophia Moretti, who had woken up halfway through the transport. Sophia didn't speak. She just stared at Sarah with wide, terrified eyes, clutching Sarah's sleeve as if letting go would mean her son would stop breathing. In the front passenger seat, Dominic Moretti was on the phone. He hadn't raised his voice, but the tension radiating off him was enough to crack the bulletproof glass. "I don't care that he's the mayor," Dominic said into the phone, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "You tell him St. Jude's is a crime scene. No one goes in or out of the neonatal wing until my team sweeps it. If the police chief has a problem with that, remind him who paid for his daughter's tuition." He hung up and glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes met Sarah's. "How is he?" "Stable," Sarah said, her voice sounding small in the cavernous car. "Pulse is 110, respiration clear. He's sleeping like nothing happened." "Good." Dominic turned back to the road. 20 minutes later they turned off the main road toward the north shore. The iron gates of the Moretti estate swung open, revealing a sprawling limestone mansion that looked more like a European castle than a home. Floodlights cut through the storm, illuminating armed guards patrolling the perimeter with Rottweilers. As the car stopped, the door was wrenched open by Matteo. "Welcome home, boss. The perimeter is secure." Dominic stepped out, buttoning his jacket. He turned and offered a hand to Sarah. She hesitated, looking at his large, calloused hand, a hand that had held a gun to her head less than 2 hours ago. "I don't bite, Sarah," Dominic said dryly, "unless I have to." She took his hand. It was warm and firm. He helped her down his grip, lingering for a second too long as he ensured she had her footing on the wet pavement. Inside the house was a museum of wealth. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings that Sarah recognized from art history textbooks. But it felt cold, empty. "Take them to the East Wing," Dominic ordered a maid who appeared from the shadows. "Prepare the nursery, and get Miss Jenkins anything she needs. Clothes, food, phone chargers." "I need my scrubs," Sarah said. "I can't work in this." She gestured to her damp, wrinkled uniform. "Your clothes are being burned," Dominic said calmly. "You're not a hospital nurse anymore. You don't wear scrubs. The maid will bring you something appropriate." "Burned," Sarah blinked. "But my keys, my bus pass." Dominic stepped close to her, his voice dropping so Sophia wouldn't hear. "You are a ghost now, Sarah. The people who tried to kill my nephew, they are still out there. If they find out a nurse saved him, they will come for you to finish the job. You have no keys, you have no bus pass, you have no address other than this one. Do you understand?" A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning ran down Sarah's spine. She realized then that the $50,000 check wasn't a bonus. It was hush money combined with danger pay. "Yes," she whispered. "Good. Go upstairs. Keep him alive." Dominic turned and walked toward the library, shouting for Matteo. "Get me the security tapes from the hospital, frame by frame. I want to know who touched that incubator before we arrived." Sarah watched him go. She was trapped in a palace with a target on her back. 3 days passed. Life at the Moretti estate was a bizarre mix of extreme luxury and high-stakes prison. Sarah's room was larger than her entire apartment. The nursery was a suite filled with toys Leo wouldn't be able to use for years. Sarah fell into a routine. She fed Leo, changed him, monitored his vitals, and slept on a cot she dragged next to his crib, refusing the plush bed in the adjoining room. Every time the baby sighed, Sarah was awake, hand on his chest. She saw Dominic rarely. He was a phantom moving through the house at odd hours. But she felt his presence. The staff whispered when he was near. The temperature seemed to change. On the fourth night, a storm was battering the windows. Leo was fussy, his little stomach upset from the formula change. Sarah was walking him around the nursery, humming a low, off-key lullaby. She remembered her mother singing, "Hush now, don't you cry. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." "You're off-key." Sarah spun around. Dominic was leaning against the doorframe. He had discarded his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and ink. He held a tumbler of amber liquid whiskey, neat. "I didn't hear you come in," Sarah said, her heart jumping. "I know. That's the point." Dominic walked into the room. He looked tired. The shadows under his eyes were deep. "How is the air?" "He's colicky," Sarah said, rocking Leo. "But his lungs are clear. No sign of the paralysis returning." Dominic nodded, looking at the baby. He took a sip of his drink. "You haven't slept in 3 days, Sarah." "I sleep when he sleeps. He sleeps 18 hours a day. You have bags under your eyes." "I'm fine," Sarah said defensively. "I'm doing my job." Dominic stepped closer. The scent of whiskey and expensive tobacco drifted off him. He reached out and touched Leo's cheek with the back of his finger. The baby turned his head toward the touch. "My sister. She's not doing well," Dominic said softly. "She's afraid to hold him. She thinks she's cursed, that she brings death to the men in her life." Sarah knew the story by now. Sophia's husband, a lieutenant in the organization, had been gunned down 2 months ago. "She's traumatized," Sarah said. "She almost lost him. Give her time." "We don't have time," Dominic muttered. He looked at Sarah. "I found out who tampered with the machine." The air in the room grew heavy. "Who?" Sarah asked. "A technician at the hospital. He had gambling debts, massive ones. Someone paid them off in exchange for him swapping the medical-grade tubing with industrial piping treated with high-grade latex preservatives. It was designed to look like natural organ failure." "Did you go to the police?" Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. Dominic laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. "The police number 1 went to the technician." He took another sip of whiskey. "He won't be tampering with machines anymore." Sarah hugged Leo tighter. She was standing next to a murderer. She knew that. But when she looked at Dominic, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man who was carrying the weight of a crumbling empire on his shoulders. "Who paid him?" Sarah asked. "He didn't know." Dominic admitted frustration leaking into his voice. "It was a blind drop, but he said the contact used a specific phrase. 'The eagle flies at midnight.'" Sarah frowned. "That sounds cinematic." "It's a code," Dominic said. "Old school. Sicilian. It hasn't been used in Chicago since the 90s. He looked at Sarah, his gaze intense. "You're safe here, Sarah. I have doubled the guard. No one gets to you or the boy." "I know," Sarah said, and strangely she believed him. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, charged with an electricity Sarah didn't understand. He looked like he wanted to say something else, perhaps something personal. Suddenly the lights in the nursery flickered. Dominic stiffened instantly. His relaxed posture vanished, replaced by the tension of a coiled viper. "Stay here," he commanded. He set his whiskey glass down on the changing table and pulled a gun from the waistband of his trousers in one fluid motion. "Dominic." "The generator should have kicked in instantly," Dominic whispered. "Stay away from the windows." He moved to the door, opening it a crack. From the hallway downstairs, there was no sound. No footsteps, no chatter from the guards. Just a heavy, suffocating silence. Then the distinct, suppressed thwip of a silenced pistol. Dominic slammed the door and locked it. He turned to Sarah, his face a mask of cold fury. "Put the baby in the closet," he ordered. "Now!" Sarah didn't argue. She rushed to the walk-in closet, placing Leo in a laundry basket on the floor and covering him with blankets. "Shh," she whispered. "Be quiet, little lion." She ran back out to the room. Dominic was dragging a heavy oak dresser in front of the door. "They're inside," Dominic said. "My guards are either dead or bought." "Who?" Sarah asked, grabbing a heavy brass lamp as a weapon. "The gallows, or the Romanos. It doesn't matter." Dominic checked the clip of his gun. "There are too many of them. I can hear the movement on the stairs." He looked at Sarah. "Can you shoot? I've played video games." "Jesus," Dominic muttered. He handed her a spare magazine. "If they get in, you hide. You don't come out until you hear my voice. If someone else opens that closet, you scratch their eyes out. You scream. You fight." "I won't let them touch him," Sarah said, her voice trembling but fierce. Boom. The bedroom door shook. Someone had kicked it. "Moretti!" A voice yelled from the hallway. It wasn't an Italian accent. It was rough American. "Mercenaries. Open up. We just want the kid. Give us the air and you can walk away." Dominic looked at the door with contempt. "Come and get him," he roared. He fired 3 shots through the wood of the door. A scream of pain echoed from the other side. Then gunfire erupted. Bullets shredded the wood, sending splinters flying across the nursery. Sarah dove behind the overturned armchair, covering her head. Dominic moved with terrifying precision, firing through the gaps, conserving his ammo. "We need an exit," Dominic shouted over the noise. "The window!" Sarah yelled. "It's a 3-story drop." Better than a bullet, Dominic laid down cover fire, then ran to the window. He smashed the glass with the butt of his gun. The wind and rain howled into the room. "Matteo!" Dominic screamed into the night. No answer. "They cut the comms!" Dominic cursed. He looked back at the door. The hinges were failing. They were using a battering ram now. Dominic grabbed Sarah's arm. "Get the baby!" Sarah scrambled to the closet and scooped up Leo, who was now crying at the noise. She ran back to Dominic. "I'm going to lower you down," Dominic said, grabbing the silk drapes and ripping them from the rod. He tied them together with a knot that looked like something a sailor would use. "Tie this around your waist. I'll hold the weight." "What about you?" Sarah cried. "I hold the line," Dominic said. He looked at her, his eyes blazing. "Go." Sarah tied the silk around her waist, clutching Leo with one forearm. She climbed onto the sill. The wind whipped her hair into her face. The ground looked miles away. "Trust me," Dominic said. She looked at him. "I do." She dropped. Dominic braced his legs against the wall, the veins in his neck bulging as he took her full weight. He lowered her hand over the hand, ignoring the bullets that were now pinging off the walls around him. Sarah hit the wet grass. She untied the knot frantically. "I'm down!" she screamed up at the window. Dominic didn't follow. He turned back to the door just as it burst open. 3 men in tactical gear stormed in. Sarah watched from the ground, paralyzed with horror, as the flashes of gunfire lit up the nursery window like a strobe light. She saw Dominic's silhouette fighting hand to hand now. He was a blur of violence. Then a massive explosion rocked the room. A grenade. Flames licked out of the window. "Dominic!" Sarah screamed. "Run!" A voice bellowed from the burning room. It was Dominic. He was alive. "Run, Sarah." Sarah didn't want to leave him. Every instinct screamed at her to stay, but she felt Leo moving against her chest. Save the air. She turned and ran into the darkness of the estate gardens, the rain masking her tears. She ran until her lungs burned. She reached the edge of the property, near the old servant's entrance that Dominic had shown her on a map days ago. She stopped to catch her breath, hiding behind a large oak tree. She checked Leo. He was wet, but safe. Well. The nurse. Sarah froze. She turned slowly. Stepping out from the shadows of the gatehouse was a man she recognized. He was wearing a tailored suit, holding an umbrella in one hand and a silenced pistol in the other. It was Luca, Dominic's uncle. The man who sat at the head of the table at dinner. The man who had cried when he saw Leo. "Uncle Luca," Sarah whispered. "Help us. They're killing everyone." Luca smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile. "I know, my dear," Luca said smoothly. "I paid them." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Why?" she gasped, stepping back. "Dominic is weak," Luca said, checking his manicure. "He cares too much about family, about honor. He's bad for business. And that baby is the only thing stopping me from being the head of this family. If Leo dies, the line of succession falls to me." He raised the gun, aiming it at the bundle in Sarah's arms. "You're a brave girl," Luca said, "but your shift is over." Sarah looked around. No guards, no Dominic, just the rain and the barrel of a gun. She had nowhere to run. Luca tightened his finger on the trigger. Click. A metallic sound echoed from the darkness behind Luca. "You should have checked the safety, Uncle." Luca spun around. Dominic Moretti stepped out of the bushes. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead. His shirt was torn and singed, and he was limping. He looked like a demon rising from hell. He held a jagged shard of glass from the nursery window in his hand. He had no gun. "Dominic!" Luca stammered, his face draining of color. "I was just securing the perimeter." "I heard you," Dominic growled, continuing to walk forward. "You called me weak." "No, Dominic, wait." Luca raised his gun to shoot Dominic, but Sarah moved. Seeing Luca distracted, she saw her only chance. She didn't run away. She ran at him. She swung the heavy brass lamp she had dragged all the way from the nursery. She hadn't even realized she was still clutching it until this moment. She swung it with all the rage of a woman who was tired of men trying to kill the child she was protecting. Crack! The base of the lamp connected with Luca's wrist. The bone snapped with a sickening crunch. Luca screamed, dropping the gun. Dominic lunged. He didn't use the glass. He used his fists. He tackled Luca into the mud, raining down blows that were fueled by a lifetime of betrayal. "You sold us out," Dominic roared, landing a punch that shattered Luca's nose. "To the gallows! For what? Money, power, for respect." Luca spat blood, laughing maniacally. "You're soft, Dominic. You let a nurse run your house." Dominic stood up, breathing heavily. He looked down at his uncle, a broken heap in the mud. "You're right," Dominic said. "I am soft, because I'm going to let you live long enough to tell me where the rest of your rats are hiding." Matteo and 3 other loyal guards finally emerged from the darkness, running toward them. They had regained control of the house. "Take him to the basement," Dominic ordered, pointing at Luca, "and don't let him die. Not yet." Dominic turned to Sarah. She was standing in the rain, still holding the lamp in one hand and the baby in the other. She was shaking uncontrollably. Dominic walked over to her. He didn't say a word. He just wrapped his arms around her and the baby, pulling them into his chest. He buried his face in her wet hair. "You stayed," he whispered into her ear. "You didn't run." "I hit him with a lamp," Sarah sobbed, the adrenaline crashing. Dominic pulled back slightly, looking at her face. He wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek with his thumb. "Remind me never to make you angry, Sarah Jenkins." For the first time since the hospital amidst the rain and the blood, Dominic leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but a kiss of reverence. "Let's go inside," he said. "We have a family to rebuild." The stitching. The adrenaline crash was worse than the fear. 2 hours after the attack, the Moretti estate was a hive of controlled chaos. Cleanup crews were already scrubbing blood from the foyer marble. Glaziers were measuring the broken windows. The bodies of the mercenaries had vanished, taken away in unmarked vans to the marshlands of Indiana. In the master bathroom, however, it was quiet. Dominic sat on the edge of the tub, his shirt removed, revealing a torso that was a map of old violent scars from knives, bullets, and wire. But tonight, there was a fresh cut, a jagged gash on his shoulder from the exploding glass. Sarah stood between his legs, a suture kit open on the counter. She wasn't shaking anymore. The nurse had returned. "This is going to sting," she said, threading the needle. "I don't have lidocaine." "I don't need it," Dominic grunted. He watched her face as she worked. She was focused, her brow furrowed, her hands gentle but efficient. She had washed the soot from her face, but a bruise was blooming on her arm, where she had hit the ground. "You should let a doctor do this," Sarah murmured, piercing his skin with the needle. "I'm done with doctors," Dominic said. "I only trust you." He hissed slightly as she pulled the thread tight. "You saved my life tonight, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "And you saved Leo. Again. I did what I had to do." "No." Dominic caught her hand, stopping her. "Most people would have run. You had an open field. You could have disappeared. Why didn't you?" Sarah looked down at him. The distance between them was non-existent. She could feel the heat radiating off his skin. "Because," she whispered, realizing the truth as she said it, "I didn't want to live in a world where you didn't exist." Dominic's eyes darkened. The air in the bathroom shifted, becoming thick and heavy. He reached up his hand, cupping the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the pulse point below her jaw. "You entered a war zone for me," he said. "You understand what that means. In my world, blood binds you. You aren't just an employee anymore. You aren't just a guest." "What am I?" Sarah asked, her breath hitching. Dominic stood up, ignoring the fresh stitches. He towered over her, consuming her space. "You're mine," he said. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive acclaiming. It tasted of whiskey and survival. Sarah melted into him, her hands finding perchance on his bare shoulders. For a moment, the mafia boss and the poor nurse ceased to exist. There was only a man and a woman who had looked death in the face and chosen each other. When they broke apart, breathless, Dominic pressed his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow things change," he promised. "No more hiding. If anyone wants to get to you, they have to burn the whole city down first." The Purge. The next morning, Chicago learned that the lion was awake. Dominic didn't just remove the rot from his organization. He cauterized it. Uncle Luca's betrayal had been deep, involving captains in 3 different districts. Dominic spent the week in meetings that ended with men missing and businesses changing hands. Sarah saw a different side of him, the ruthless tactician. She sat in on the meetings in the library, holding Leo on her lap. At first, the other captains, hard men with scars and criminal records, looked at her with confusion. Why is the nanny here? But they learned quickly. During a heated dispute with a union leader who was refusing to move shipments, Dominic had remained silent, letting the man scream. Sarah, who was burping. Leo simply looked up and said, "He's lying about the tonnage. I checked the manifests on the desk. The numbers don't match the shipping weight." The room went silent. Dominic smiled. The union leader turned pale. "She reads the manifests," the man stammered. "She reads everything," Dominic said, leaning back in his chair. "And she's right. You're skimming off the top." That afternoon, the union leader was replaced. Sarah wasn't just the caregiver anymore. She became the gatekeeper. She organized Dominic's chaotic schedule. She managed the household staff with a firmness that surprised everyone. She even cross-referenced the medical supplies for the organization's underground clinics, saving them thousands of dollars and improving survival rates for wounded soldiers. She was intelligent, sharp, and because she came from poverty, she understood the value of $1 in a way these men born into crime royalty did not. But the real test came 2 weeks later. The gala, the debut. The Chicago Winter Charity Ball was the biggest social event of the season. It was neutral ground where politicians, judges, and the heads of the crime families mingled under the guise of philanthropy. "I can't go," Sarah said, staring at the dress hanging in her room. It was a custom-made gown of midnight blue velvet, designed to hug every curve. "Dominic, I'm a nurse. I don't know how to talk to senators." Dominic walked into the room, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked devastating in a tuxedo. "You don't need to talk to them," Dominic said. "You just need to stand next to me. Tonight, we show the city that the Moretti family is unbreakable, and we show them who the new lady of the house is." "I'm not," Sarah trailed off. "Put on the dress, Sarah." When they arrived at the Drake Hotel, the paparazzi flashbulbs were blinding. Dominic stepped out of the limousine first, buttoning his jacket. He turned and offered his hand. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought of the 15 doctors who had sneered at her. She thought of the debt collectors who used to pound on her father's door. She thought of Luca pointing a gun at Leo. She wasn't that scared girl anymore. She had knocked out a capo with a lamp. She had saved the air. She took Dominic's hand and stepped out. A hush fell over the red carpet. Sarah Jenkins looked regal. The blue velvet made her skin glow, and around her neck hung a necklace of diamonds and sapphires, a family heirloom Dominic had given her in the car. "Who is she?" The whispers started. Inside the ballroom, Dominic didn't leave her side. He introduced her to the mayor, to the police commissioner, and to the rival, Don of the Romano family. "This is Isra," Dominic introduced her simply. "Not my nurse, not my girlfriend, just Sarah." The implication was clear. "She is my equal." Halfway through the night, Dr. Alistair Sterling appeared. The disgraced doctor had managed to claw his way into the event, likely looking for new benefactors. When he saw Dominic, he turned pale and tried to retreat, but he bumped directly into Sarah. Miss Jenkins," Sterling stuttered, sweating profusely. "I heard you were working privately now." The room went quiet. People were watching. This was the doctor who had nearly killed Leo. Sarah looked at him. She held a glass of champagne in her hand. She could have humiliated him. She could have had Dominic drag him out. Instead, she smiled. It was a cold Moretti smile. "It's good to see you, Doctor." "Sterling," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I hope you've updated your knowledge on polymer toxicity. It would be a shame for another accident to happen." She turned to the Chief of Medicine of Chicago General, who was standing nearby. "Dr. Sterling was just telling me he's looking for a sabbatical to study basics. Perhaps you can recommend a remedial program." Sterling turned red. The circle of elites laughed. In that moment, Sarah didn't just destroy his reputation. She did it with a surgical precision that terrified him more than a gun. Dominic watched her from a few feet away, a glass of scotch in his hand, pride swelling in his chest. "She's a killer," Matteo whispered to Dominic. "Yes," Dominic nodded. "She is." The proposal. 6 months passed. Leo was crawling now, a healthy, boisterous baby who was already trying to climb the furniture. Sophia had recovered, finding strength in her son's survival. She had taken over the family's legitimate charity foundations, leaving the business to Dominic. Sarah and Dominic had fallen into a rhythm of domestic power, but there was one thing left to settle. It happened on the balcony of the estate overlooking the lake. The snow was falling, covering the grounds in a blanket of white. "My lawyers finished the paperwork today," Dominic said, handing Sarah a thick envelope. "Paperwork?" Sarah asked, worried. "Is something wrong?" "Open it." Sarah opened the folder. It wasn't a prenup. It was an adoption decree. And a deed. "I'm adopting Leo," Dominic said. "Officially. He will be my son in the eyes of the law, not just my nephew. Sophia agrees it's best for his protection." Sarah nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "That's wonderful, Dominic." "Read the rest." Sarah flipped the page. It was a deed to the estate. Half of it was in Dominic's name. The other half was in hers. "I don't understand," she said. Dominic took the papers from her and set them on the stone railing. He took her hands. "I never wanted a wife," Dominic said. "I saw what this life did to women. It broke them. It made them widows. But you don't break, Sarah. You fix things. You fixed Leo. You fixed this house. You fixed me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't a modern cut. It was an antique, a massive, square-cut diamond, surrounded by rubies dark as blood. It had belonged to his grandmother, the first matriarch of the outfit. "This ring has a history of violence," Dominic said. "But I want to give it a future of loyalty. Marry me, Sarah. Be the mother to this boy. Be the queen of this city." Sarah looked at the ring, then at the man who had given her a purpose, a family, and a love so fierce it terrified her. "Yes," she whispered. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. 5 years later. The camera pans over a sunlit garden. A 5-year-old boy with dark curls runs through the grass, chasing a golden retriever. He laughs, a sound of pure joy. "Leo." "Careful near the roses," Sarah calls out. She is sitting on the terrace drinking tea. She looks different now. Her hair is cut in a sharp, chic bob. Her clothes are tailored silk. She radiates authority. Dominic walks out reading a tablet. He kisses the top of her head. "The shipment arrived," he says quietly, "and the Romano dispute is settled." "Did you have to use the leverage?" Sarah asks, not looking up from her book. "No. I just told them my wife wasn't happy with their pricing." Dominic smirks. They folded immediately. Sarah smiles. "Good." Leo runs up to them, breathless. "Mom." "Dad, look what I found." He holds up a beetle. Dominic crouches down, looking at the bug with mock seriousness. A fine specimen, Leonardo. Strong armor. Sarah watches them, the two loves of her life. The world outside the gates is still dangerous. The FBI still watches them. Rivals still plot. But inside these walls they are untouchable. The nurse who was invisible, the girl drowning in debt, had died that night in the hospital. In her place stood a woman who had walked through fire and tamed the lion. She wasn't just Sarah Jenkins anymore. She was Sarah Moretti. And in Chicago that name meant more than the mayor. It meant you were safe, as long as you didn't cross her family. And that is the incredible story of how Sarah Jenkins went from emptying trash cans to ruling the Chicago underworld. It reminds us that sometimes true expertise isn't found in degrees or titles, but in the instinct to protect the innocent. Sarah proved that while 15 doctors saw a dying patient, she saw a life worth fighting for, and in doing so she found a love worth dying for. The doctors treated the chart, the nurse treated the child, and Dominic Moretti. He learned that the strongest weapon in his arsenal wasn't a gun, but the woman standing beside him. Wow, what a roller coaster. If your heart was racing during the hospital scene, or if you cheered when Sarah hit Uncle Luca with that lamp hit that like button. Right now, it really helps the channel. What do you think? Did Dominic forgive the doctors too easily, or was his justice perfect? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more gripping stories of romance, betrayal, and justice that you won't hear anywhere else, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.